An Introduction to the Science of Hadith by Ibn Salah al-Shahrazuri, 577 to 643. The most influential work on the science of Hadith in existence. Category 21. Al-Mawdu', forged Hadith. The forged Hadith is the fabricated, made-up Hadith. Be aware that the forged Hadith is the worst kind of the weak Hadith. It is not permissible under any circumstances for someone who is aware that Hadith is forged to relate it, unless coupled with a declaration that it is forged. This is different from the other kinds of weak Hadith, which may possibly be fundamentally truthful, inasmuch as that it is permissible to transmit the other kinds of weak Hadith to instill virtue and inspire fear, at-targhib wa-tarhib. As we will explain shortly, God, He is exalted, willing. A hadith can be known to be forged only by the acknowledgement of its forger or something equivalent to his acknowledgement. Sometimes scholars come to recognize a forgery by interference from the state of the transmitter or that of the report he transmits. The feebleness of the words and the sense of some long hadith bear witness to the fact that they are forged. Indeed, the individual who in our time collected al-Mawdu'at in roughly 2 volumes did this a lot, and he included many hadith without proof of their having been forged. He should have mentioned them only under the general designation of weak hadith. There are different kinds and types of forgers of hadith. The greatest of them in terms of harm they do are some of those considered to be ascetics, pious people who forge hadith supporting their claims in expectation of a heavenly reward. The people accept their forgeries, putting their faith in these forgers and relying on them. Later, praise be to God, the critics of hadith resolutely took on the task of exposing the defectiveness of these hadith and obliterating their disgrace. One of the things we heard from the authority Abu Bakr al-Sam'ani is that some of the Karamites held the doctrine that it was permissible to forge hadith for the sake of instilling virtue and inspiring fear. The forger sometimes made up the remarks himself and related them as a hadith, and sometimes took the words of a wise man or someone else and falsely ascribed them to the Messenger of God. Sometimes someone erred unintentionally and fell into something close to forgery, as happened to the ascetic Thabit bin Musa in the hadith, "The face of whoever prays much at night becomes beautiful in the day." Another example we heard from Abu Isma, and he is Nuh ibn Abi Maryam, who was asked, "Where did you get the hadith from Ikramah from Ibn Abbas concerning the magical properties, fada'il, of each surah of the Quran?" He said, "I saw that the people had turned their backs on the Quran, had come to occupy themselves with Abu Hanifa's legal doctrines and Muhammad ibn Ishaq's stories of the Prophet's campaigns, so I forged these hadith as a way to gain favour with God." The same is true of the long hadith which is related from Ubay ibn Ka'ab from the Prophet, peace be upon him, which describes the magical property of the Quran surah by surah. One researcher investigated its source until he reached someone who confessed that he and a group of others had forged it, and indeed the mark of a forgery is clearly upon it. The truth is that the commentator Wahidi and other commentators who mention it have made a mistake in including it in their commentaries, and God knows best. Stay tuned for many more parts.